So today I'm going to be ranking every level in Rayman Origins, and I will have to give props where they are due. I got the idea for this video off from a fellow YouTuber called Rhyme. A link to his video will be provided below, and I honestly think you should check his channel out. Link in the description below. As usual, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and I would love to hear yours in the comments below. As you all know from my last video in this game, this is one of my favorite games from my childhood years. Without further ado, let's get started. Now in my opinion, the worst level in the game is none other than Way of the Electoons. Now throughout this video you'll hear me complain about these types of levels. However, Way of the Electoons gets a seat at the worst, as if you're trying to 100% the game, you may miss a few lumps, and if you do, there is no way you can go back, so you'll have to restart. This can heavily affect players trying to speedrun the game, as they will lose time having to restart. Wind or Lose is a level where it just takes too much time to finish, sitting there and hovering really slowly across the winds. I find Wind or Lose to be a really tedious and unnecessarily long level. Honestly, I have always kind of hated the wind mechanic in this game, they're just so annoying and slow. Tricky Winds is another tedious level with the annoying wind mechanics. Though this level isn't as long, and even though there are sections that are extremely slow, I still think that this level is a little better than Wind or Lose. Once again, we return to the Electoon bridge levels. Now, there isn't even a whole lot to talk about, considering you could finish the entire level in under a minute. I honestly just don't see the point of having this level in the game at all. This is the first underwater level that I am placing here. Rayman Origins is one of the few games that I have played that actually made water levels fun and enjoyable. A few of them, however, I feel that are still way too long. I'm sure many speedrunners will agree with me on this, but I generally don't like the whole concept of having to wait and jump across those snake things. I remember it frustrated me to the point where I turned off the PS3 back when the game came out. Just never really liked it for some reason. This is the first Electric Bridge level, so as you can imagine, there is not a whole lot to it. Just like the others, it's a simple run level with the electrons you have collected along the way are clearing the path. As usual, there isn't really anything special here. Now, Snake Eyes is once again another level where you have to jump in between the snakes, but this time there is some added challenge to it. Once again, another level that frustrated me back in 2011. Now, I know that most of you will agree on this one that this is the worst boss in the game. Whilst the other boss fights include a cool cutscene along with the player having to run away from the boss in a chase sequence, this one doesn't. Plus, this level uses the very annoying wind mechanics which you have to use to avoid the boss. A lot of improvement is needed for this boss to be better. Okay, finally we have reached the final level where an Electoon bridge is present. It's just a repeat of the previous level, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Now for those who watched my previous video on this game will know that my favourite levels in Rayman Origins are the ice levels. Unfortunately, when the level in question is Ice Fishing Folly, I can't really commend it. This is the first chest chase level, and honestly, it's just a massive trial and error level. Some paths are just confusing to navigate. This is the first mosquito level that you will encounter, and it is high up on the list because the level is the slowest and has a lot of points where nothing is going on. I understand that this is what you expect considering it's the first mosquito level, but there are just too many stoppages. A lot of this level comes down to timing so that you don't get hit. Back in the day I was horrible at that, so you can imagine how I feel about this level in general. I can imagine that for anyone trying to speedrun this game, it is the same pain. This is the very first level in Rayman Origins. For the first half or so of the level you can't even attack until the nymph grants you the power. Now, my least favorite area in the entirety of Rayman Origins is the desert of, I still can't pronounce the name, the music one, you know? Best original score is up here just for the fact that the level is boring. The rooms where the Electoons are stuck here look kinda cool, but other than that, there isn't much to it. As much as I find it hilarious to be jumping around the drums and play music with them, I think it gets really repetitive it being done for an entire level. Cacophonic Chase is once again another level where you have to chase the chest. Now usually I don't have any issues with these kinds of levels as I find the rhythm type jumping quite fun. Although this one just kinda stretches out for too long, and don't forget that if you fail, you have to start from the very beginning. I always find myself trying to speedrun through Swimming with Stars as a lot of the level is just you navigating through the dark waters whilst avoiding any enemies that creep around. It's a cool concept, but this level just feels like a drag, especially now that I've been playing through the game so many times. This is the first level that you encounter upon reaching Gormand Land, so as you can imagine, this is another level where you have to rescue the nymph and get a new power. The power you get here is to be able to shrink and grow in size. I feel that this power is the least interesting out of all of them, so I can't place this level any higher. This chase level honestly doesn't have a lot to it. It looks visually appealing, but it doesn't really last a long time, and honestly I feel that the hitbox for some of those blades just doesn't feel right. Tuned Up Chase is not a bad level, but I put it there mainly because it does the same as most of the other levels like this, and because it's in the desert of Doritos. Geyser Blow is a pretty funny level, especially with the fact that you have to time the jumps into the geysers to be able to proceed. It's a pretty good level, but I generally feel that there are better levels than this one in this world. Now, I love the mosquito levels as much as the next guy, but considering that this level takes place in what I think is the worst world, Desert of Doritos, I can't really recommend it any further down the list. Why So Crabby is another example of a level where I honestly would just prefer to skip it. It's one of those underwater levels that I feel are just dragged out and unnecessary, but then again, it is just me. Scuba Shootout is not by any means a bad level. I just feel that the whole having to dodge the eels feels a little repetitive, and dodging them isn't necessarily that difficult as you mostly just have to aim to stay in the middle of the map. Savage Swarms has a pretty cool soundtrack that plays in the background, and I really love the detail of grabbing the light and having to use it to avoid the swarms. This is a great level by all means and a wonderful introduction to the underwater levels. It starts off with Rayman running through a port that is being attacked by the airship in the background. The residents are all being attacked, and the music just gives the player that feeling of panic and having to run away fast. The power given to you by the nymph here is the power to dive, which in all honesty is one of the most useful. Dashing through the snow is a great level, but when I was younger, I really hated the bubble sections that this level contained. They just felt really finicky and would spend most of my time raging about the fact that I fell off rather than actually enjoying it. Visually, this level is absolutely amazing to look at, especially when you are forced into the background where you see nothing but the silhouette of the enemies and obstacles. Punching Plateas is a pretty neat level. It has a fun bit of challenge while still being a great level, especially for the first world. Aim for the Eel is one of the most fun mosquito levels that there is. There is even a mini boss at the end that just makes it really entertaining. Going back to my earlier point of Hunter Gatherer, where I said that the shade part of the level was really interesting, I never thought that it would work so well for a level where you have to chase the treasure chest. Free Kick Flipper is where Ubisoft absolutely nailed the underwater levels. It generally feels really fun. One of the cage rooms has honestly the most perfect rescue ever. It's basic, but you get to crash down multiple meters into the ground. What's not to like about this? Shooting Me Softly is a great level with a lot of attention to detail. Having to bounce your shots off from the drums to hit the bags full of lumps was honestly great and really got a player to have to think carefully about their next move. Once again, we get to run through the port, which is a concept that works really well. I loved running through the port in Porto Panic, so I love doing it here once again. It's pretty satisfying when the game actually lets you into this world rather than just shutting you out like it does the first time. Just being there makes it feel more satisfying. The level itself is great, the challenge has been ramped up so there will be more for the player to avoid. Pickle Fruit is a pretty interesting level as there are a few invincible enemies that give the challenge a massive boost. Even at the end of the level, you have to knock down one of the spiky oranges in order to be able to rescue the cage. Tricky Treasure Temple is once again another very satisfying level to look at. The only disappointing factor is that it is so short. I always found it satisfying being able to just jump around in the jungle. This level in World 1 is where the difficulty starts to go up, but it really isn't all that bad. Getting the skull coins now has an added challenge, which has a nice touch. Up and down really test you in terms of jumps. The entirety of the level is based on Rayman just jumping through the entire course. Quite literally, it is in the name, up and down. It makes for a fun challenge. Sink or Swim hits you with what I think is the most satisfying jumps that a person could ask for, especially in the ice world. Watching the ice break off and then having to perfectly time your jumps between them is honestly just the cherry on the top. Fire When Wetty is actually a better example with the use of the eels. This time around, they will actually swim around lumps and you have to go for them at the right time, or you will surely meet your fate. Certain sections of this level are just so satisfying to navigate through. The wall jumps whilst the walls are slowly closing in is a nice touch for the level for sure. As you can imagine with the name Climb Out, you literally have to wall jump your way to the end of the level. Now in the final world of the game is where things become the hardest. Now I think this is a good thing. It's also really interesting having to navigate through a mechanical world and having robot enemies that you have to just strategically take out. Now this is the level where the power to wall run is given to you. Now that power up is extremely fun, useful. Not to mention those vertical jumps that you have to complete. Also, if you replay this level, you could take a separate path that can only be done with the ability to wall run. So yeah, top 20 for sure. Risky Rune is honestly one of the most top fun tricky treasure levels. It will lead the player to have to navigate through the dark waters while trying to stay in the light. The main problem I have with these types of levels is the fact that the good runs would be short, but this is definitely not the case. I honestly love the transition between starting off in the ice world and then dropping off to the lower sections and seeing it all change and being surrounded by fire. It kinda reminds me of Jak and Daxter where the snow level is above the volcano. I really like how in Still Flowing the level kind of breaks off into separate sections with seemingly lots of possibilities. Usually it will break off into two where there will be a coin on one side and lots of lumps on the other. Now this is the first tricky treasure level that you will encounter. As you can imagine it is easier than the other chases but it's a great introduction to them nonetheless. Honestly the others would give me a bit of a headache. Everything about this level goes with the flow. Being able to slide with your character down the waterfalls and jumping at the right time to get all the lumps is absolutely great. The first time I ever played through Getaway when I was a kid, I don't think I ever got any more annoyed at a game. It is a massive trial and error type level, but once I understood what needed to be done, I can now do it with no problems, so it feels really satisfying. This level will definitely test your skill in terms of combat, parkour, and timing abilities. This level is extremely hard, but considering this is the end of the game, it makes a whole lot of sense. This is a fantastic introduction to ticklish temples. Having to jump over rockets to get to higher sections will really test the player's ability. Although I think that there is a better mosquito level than Shoot for the Stars, I definitely think this level is incredible. There is a nice attention to detail where you can shoot certain parts of the airship and they will actually fall off. It is a perfect finale to the perfect game. Now this boss is usually the first one you will encounter in the second half of the game. It's not too difficult, but it may take a while to beat as you have to learn all of the moves that are about to hit you. You're on Fire to me is the perfect mosquito level. It has you dodging spouts of lava that are being thrown out at you, and honestly to me it just feels like the most perfect mosquito level there is. I love how mystical monkeys will have you running around through the interiors and exteriors of the mountain. I don't know why, but every time I would walk into an inside part of the mountain, I couldn't help but feel cozy. There is no other intense swimming level quite like Be Aware of Minnie Murray. You will be swimming casually until all of a sudden you will be getting chased by a massive army of fish, I guess. Honestly, it doesn't get more intense than that. Dragon Troop is a great level, and as I have said time and time again, I really love the ice/fire levels. They have always been my favorite. I find the parkouring on spoons extremely hilarious. I think this is another perfect example of a boss fight. It starts off with the player having to run away from a massive eel, which can sometimes actually be glitched and not even appear. And then you face off the boss itself. Very intense lead up and boss fight indeed. This level that once I played this game left me mesmerized. Seeing the previous two bosses appear in mechanical form was incredible, not to mention the amazing dance moves that Rayman pulls off towards the end. This level must be what a lot of players think about when they hear the name Rayman Origins. Jolly G Golem is the best level in the mountain wall. It's the first, I guess, boss, if you can even call it that, that appears in the first half of the game. It's pretty simple having to dodge the thorns, but satisfying nonetheless. The Land of the Living Dead is the perfect final level in the game. You finally get to visit the place that made the story. It is the most difficult thing I've ever had to complete, but it is somewhat worth it. While the boss at the end is a little confusing at first, you should be able to figure it out. Trust me, gathering all those teeth make it worthwhile. In my opinion, this is the best level in the game. The boss fight, soundtrack, and overall feel is just amazing. It's just the most perfect level/boss fight that there is, and I know a lot of you will agree. I hope you all enjoyed this video.